Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Eve Echoes. Tonight on the show, we're just going to take a look at the ship trees and how do they look on the test server. Now, this is the public test server. This contains the update that is supposed to hit in May. And boy, oh boy, does it suck. Now, a bunch of ships have been introduced, and we're going to take a look at them. We have the comparison tool. It was deployed in an earlier version on the live server. We do have it on the test server as well. So we're going to start with something relatively simple. I think it was one of the first ships that were the ship's classes or whatever, marks, tiers, that was introduced and was announced to be introduced. It's the bombers, the Mark III bombers. Now, the Mark II bombers are actually bad, but not due to the ship itself being bad, but the actual torpedo, the large torpedo. The Mark I bomber carries medium torpedoes, and those do pretty nice damage application. If you don't know what damage application is, basically the warhead does a boom and it deals some damage. But how much of that damage is applied to your ship or your victim's ship goes through many calculations, which involve explosion radius and explosion velocity. Now think of whatever you're shooting at as a potato, and you're launching pebbles at this potato. If the pebble is going to detonate on impact, it will create a shockwave, and that shockwave will move at a given speed. This is the explosion velocity, and it's the explosion radius. Now, if this explosion caused by the pebble, this detonation, is small enough to cover the entire area of the potato, then what you have is full damage application in terms of the missile explosion. The second factor, that is the explosion velocity, well, that detonation travels at some specific speed. It's written on the missiles themselves. So what happens if that potato is traveling through space? If the explosion velocity is smaller than the speed of the potato, then the potato will basically leave the explosion behind it. So what do we know about missiles? Well, the smaller the explosion radius is and the higher the explosion velocity is, the better you get to apply the full damage of the missile on your potato. If the explosion velocity is high enough, but your explosion radius is too big for your potato, imagine the potato occupying just the space on the explosion disc. It will get that amount of damage from the entire explosion, because all the rest of the explosion, the impact and damage, is going to be dissipated in some other direction. So basically, once the pebble, the missile, detonates, you get a circle around it, which is the explosion radius, and the velocity, which the explosion expands from the center of the circle towards its outer ring. If the potato is inside the disc, and given the fact how much of that area occupies, this is the amount of damage you get applied to the potato. Pretty nice and easy calculations, isn't that? Now, why the large torpedoes are so bad? Well, basically because the explosion velocity is shit and the explosion radius is too big, meaning the potato inside one of these explosion discs, if we would look at it, will occupy a tiny amount, meaning it will get only a fraction of the entire explosion damage. If the potato is also moving, then what we will have is probably a fraction, because it will occupy some specific portion on the disc, probably outwards, and if the explosion velocity is not high enough, then the damage will not catch up. So this means that the missile will just explode behind the potato, no damage will be applied, you will be dealing a very tiny, small amount of damage, but that's going to be pretty much it. So what's happening with the large torpedoes? Well, if you shoot something else that's not battleship, it's smaller. Now, the size of the potato is not actually the potato itself. We need to consider the signature radius of the potato, which is basically the hitbox of the potato. The higher the signature radius of that potato is, it means you see the potato as it is, but actually it is much bigger than what it will look like. So if you have a potato that's 2 centimeters and you have a signature radius of 300 meters, then you will still see the potato as being 2 centimeters, but its hitbox will be 200 meters. Meaning if I point a gun at that potato and fire, I deal damage if I hit it dead center. I deal damage if I just move 100 meters to its right. I'm not aiming at the potato, but I'm hitting its hitbox, so I'm dealing damage either way. That's why target painters work. That's how you make the target bigger, so the explosion radius and the explosion velocity get to apply to a bigger target than it's actually visible. You know, it's all weird science, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And that's why the Mark II bombers are ridiculous in terms of how bad they are. And it's not because of the ship, as I mentioned, but it's due to the weapons that they're using. So all this science aside, let's take a look at the actual ship. So we have the comparison tool. There we have it. We have the Nemesis Mark II and the Nemesis Mark III. We just take a look at the stats. Just by the high slots and low slots, they're pretty much the same. Yep, no change there. This is supposed to be an improvement. The roll bonuses are the same. Cloaking device lock delay, blah blah blah. We get to the damage. We got the Mark II has 10% kinetic damage on large torpedoes, and the Mark III has 15% large torpedo kinetic damage, so it's a 5% increase. But that's stupid, because if you just buff up the damage, the explosion radius and the explosion velocity are pretty much the same. Guess what happens if you still shoot something that is small enough to occupy a small portion of that explosion disk and fast enough to avoid the explosion velocity? Well, you can have as much damage as you want. You would deal absolutely shit damage. Same things happen with the explosive damage, and the velocity is pretty much the same. Inertia modifier, and that's that. There is no bonus applied by the ship to the missile it fires, to the torpedo it fires, where that explosion radius and explosion velocity is applied. Sovereign RPG talked about this in a video that he released, I think today or yesterday, depending on when you see this video. It will be linked below. He abandoned Eve Echoes, but is still covering on some subjects, and this was an interesting subject, and that's why I decided to continue in part what he was trying to say. And that's pretty much the basic raw idea. If you just add damage and you don't buff the other important factors, you get a shit starting point and end up with a shit endpoint, which is basically shit. Yeah, it's shit. That's exactly what it is. The two ships are pretty much the same. The problem is with the weapons. The problem is the fact that they added a Mark III bomber, but not taking care of the flaws that the Mark II bomber had, or the flaws that the weapon system had. This is not a good addition in any way, and it's not solving the problem. It's just trying to take away your eyes with some new content, new shiny stuff, but the problem still remains. But that's pretty much it about the bombers. That's what I was trying to say, and I hope you understood the simple math or the allegory with the potato and all that. I'm going to move over to the Interdictor Destroyers. So what I think happened here, the Interdictor Destroyers were pretty much the best destroyers out there. They had bubble, they had good damage, they had everything that, well, not everything, it was still shit, but out of all of the destroyers, the Interdictor Destroyer was the best. And if we look at the update, what happened right there? Well, the Interdictor Destroyers basically got 2 high slots removed. So they had 4, now they have just 2. Why? Well, let's analyze this for a little bit. What happens if the given player base uses only one type of the destroyer because, well, it's obviously the best and they're using it because all the other destroyers down below the tech tree pretty much shit. The server, or I think that's what happened and how the developers actually decided on this specific balance update, quote unquote, is that everywhere you would look at server data or server statistics or whatever you're analyzing when you're looking at whatever people are using, constantly flying, constantly dying in, this ship was popping out everywhere. So I'm guessing 90% of the destroyers flown were these Interdictor Destroyers. Be it the Tech Level 9 version or the Tech Level 6 version, the Catalyst Interdictor, or the Catalyst 2 Interdictor, or whatever. Mark 1, Mark 2 Interdictors, doesn't matter. So these were the best destroyers that the game could offer. And if you look at those statistics, you would see that players only favored this ship. But why? Well, because every other destroyer, as I mentioned previously, was shit. And it's still shit, and everything in terms of destroyers is still shit. Only that little bit of speed might help a bit, but nope, still shit. So if you are a guy that analyzes data, you're not going to go into Discord, you're not going to be given any feedback. No, you're just hired to analyze the data. What do you see? You will see this ship popping everywhere. You will see that this ship is mostly used, and it's being used like crazy. So you get this data and you take it to some other guy and say, well, look at this, all the people are flying this kind of destroyer, why aren't they flying the other ones? And that guy, just using your data that you just printed and you're showing it to him, he'll think, well, this destroyer must be OP. Everyone is flying this because, well, it's the better version of the destroyer, and somehow we figured out things wrong and they ended up playing only Interdictor Destroyer. It doesn't matter if they want to go on sniper or an assault or whatever, they simply just use this destroyer because it's better than everyone else. So without taking into consideration or even looking at player feedback or content creator feedback, just looking at that raw data, or you ask yourself, how do I fix this? Well, they only fly this thing, but you have no idea why are they flying this thing, because it's better than everything else. So your conclusion is this must be OP, and it means that it must be nerfed. So people will not fly oftenly and, I don't know, go towards the other destroyers and use those as well. Okay, this sounds like a plan. What do we do? Well, take a big dump on the damage that these destroyers do as output. So the Interdictor Destroyers, Mark 1 and Mark 2, just got a big chunk of damage removed. Like, let's cut it in half. Oh, but I have another idea. Let's add another Interdictor Destroyer, which is the Mark 3 variant of the Interdictor Destroyers. And what do you know? Well, let's keep this line. Like, we've nerfed those two. We're going to add the Mark 3. Let's maintain this idea of not making these ships OP, so we're just going to propagate the shit all over the place, and we got two high slots, be it the Mark 3, be it the Mark 2, be it the Mark 1. So every goddamn Interdictor Destroyer has just two high slots, and then you sit back and relax and get a cup of tea and tell to yourself, well, we fixed those, people are going to fly other destroyers now, we nailed it. No, you did not. By doing that, you not only destroyed an important class. Why? Because it says right there in the title, it says it's an Interdictor Destroyer. What does that mean? It's supposed to have interdiction ability, right? Deploy bubbles and shit. And it's supposed to be a destroyer. And it should be able to fulfill these two roles, right? They've got the role of the Interdictor and the role of the Destroyer. Now, the Destroyer role is a basic role. It's the fundamental role of this specific ship. It's supposed to fulfill that role, meaning what's a Destroyer's purpose? To be an anti-frigate platform. So you nerfed it, you cut the DPS in half, you cut two high slots. What does it do now? Well, I can tell you, it won't be able to crack down on a standard frigate tank. So flying this solo, just trying to frag frigates, you can get that dream out of your skull because it's not going to happen anymore. So right now, these ships can no longer be called Interdictor Destroyers because they're no longer destroyers anymore. You can call them small interdictors. Yeah, that would be the correct word. Call them small interdictors because they're not destroyers anymore. They are unable to defend against a frigate. But you'd say, oh, but they are using the hull of that destroyer. Well, screw that. They cannot fulfill the destroyer role. They cannot be called destroyers. Might as well just put a frog hull or a flying pony and call it an interdiction ship. That's it. No destroy. It's just a flying, or it can even be a rock with a bubble launcher. That's it. So this is how I think statistics analysis ruined these line of ships. The Interdictor Destroyers fell prey to statistics analysis. And if you think people will switch over to the snipers and the assault destroyers, well, all destroyers are shit. People are never going to fly destroyers again. And if I'm wrong, please call me out on my bullshit. These ships are still going to be used because, well, in fleet combat, you kind of need interdictors. You want to keep the enemy in place. But I don't know, if everyone would just fit a disruptor, you could have the same effect, I think, and just completely remove this out of your lineup, out of your fleet's lineup, because it will do absolutely no damage. You think you can use it close by, drop the bubble and try to use it as an anti-drone boat or try to get rid of tackle? No, it cannot do that anymore. So aside from the fact that it's just laying bubbles, what is its purpose? Why would you still use such a thing in your fleet composition? That's one wasted slot just to lay down some bubbles. Holy shit. Might as well just add an interceptor and try to focus some specific ships, and I don't know. Because the tech level 10 interceptors, oh boy, I'm going to keep those for another video. I think I'm going to stop here before I go mad and start cursing and swearing all over the place. I want to keep this channel decent. I'm still upset and I'm still angry, but I want to give you guys the full impression of me analyzing or taking a look at these ships and why I think this update is horrendous. Be sure to submit your feedback. I think a feedback URL, a link will be provided by the community managers in order for us to submit feedback regarding this balance update. Be sure to keep it civil. Don't use curse words. I know you're angry, I'm angry, everyone is angry, but let's keep it civil. Why? Because probably hate containing feedback will get ignored. You don't want that. We don't want that. We want that feedback to reach them in some manner or in some way, so they would understand that what they've done here, they just took a big dump on everything that Eve means. This is not supposed to be a race on the vertical. Whoever has the biggest ship or the highest tier level ship is the winner on the battlefield. No, this is supposed to be asymmetrical combat. Every ship should have specific roles and should be able to fulfill its duties on the battlefield. Its intended design purpose. Right now, this looks horrible. Don't forget about our community question of the week. What do you think about this balance update? Is it good or is it bad? We're going to be announcing the winners on next Wednesday, so please leave a comment below and let me know. That's it for today. I hope you guys learned something. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.